Hello and welcome to this chess blowout video in which one side defeats the other side quickly. And so today we have with the white pieces Mikhail Botvinnik, former world chess champion. And this is toward the end of his career, 1968. And it was played at Monte Carlo. So he's playing against Portisch, a famous grandmaster. And so first I'll just play through the game so you can check it out. And then I'll do a game review and analysis so you can dig deeper and see, what was really going on in this game, because this is a pretty crazy game. So it begins with c4, the English opening. And now e5 is the response. So this is almost like a reversed Sicilian. The Sicilian would be e4 and then c5. So the game continues with knight to c3, knight to f6. So both sides begin their development here in the opening. And now we have g3. So kind of like maybe a reversed dragon in the Sicilian, where black would normally play g6 up here, but now white is taking this setup. So a pawn thrust in the middle, and so black has set up the ideal central pawns here, and white doesn't want to allow that, so of course he captures. And then after recapture, we have the development of the bishop here. So bishop and knight are both attacking. Now normally black would not want to capture the knight here because it would just allow white to recapture with the b pawn, pulling another pawn in towards the center and strengthening the center, because white already has two central pawns versus black's only one here. So the knight does not retreat. It just black just develops the bishop to help defend this knight along with the queen. So now we have knight to f3. White is ready to castle, and they both just continue their development. So castling. Black finally decides to retreat here. Now the queen is kind of eyeing this half-open file. The knight is retreated back to avoid exchanges, and the game continues with d3 here, perhaps to prevent any future pawn pushes with pawn to e4. So now, also this will prevent the knight maybe from jumping forward as well, or the bishop. So the game continues with bishop to e7. Now black is ready to castle. a3 is played, and a5. So black gains some space on the queen side and also prevents this b4 pawn push for the moment. Because if this pawn was pushed forward and we have capture, the pawn could not recapture, or else the rook would be captured on a1 here, as this bishop is blocking the queen from protecting that rook. All right, so the bishop moves out of the way here, developing kind of an interesting developing plan, blocking in this e pawn. But you're aiming at this knight, potentially a possibility of capturing the knight and doubling the pawns. So the game continues with castling by black, and the knight jumps forward here. So targeting this knight along with the bishop. So capture, queen recaptures, and now the bishop centralizes on d5, aiming at the knight and the bishop. Maybe, if this knight moves at any point, black would be able to exchange off this nice defensive bishop, which would leave a weakness on the light squares around the white king here. So the rook takes the half-open file, and black develops his rook, hoping to maybe use this rook to defend this pawn and push this pawn forward in the future, and it'll be backed up by the rook after this bishop moves out of the way. So white pushes his rook forward, getting ready, preparing the way to double rooks on this half-open file. So the bishop retreats back, possibly allowing the pawn to push forward here, and doubling of the rooks by white. So now the game continues with black retreating his knight, thinking that he can retreat the knight and then maybe push this pawn forward to block out the path of these rooks from moving up towards black's side of the board, and thinking that, well, if the rook captures this pawn, then the rook could be trapped in, which, that is exactly what happens. So capture, the rook is trapped in, and now what? What should white do here? Well, we have a capture, exchanging here, recapture, and now what do you think white should do in this position? His rook looks like it's in trouble here. So, what was Botvinnik thinking? Well, he plays a pretty amazing move here. He sacrifices his rook, but black does not take this sacrifice here, does not go after the rook. And we'll see why in the analysis. So stick around for the game review and the analysis, and we'll see why this was such a great move. So because the rook was not captured, Botvinnik has time to retreat, and once the queen attacks, the rook can just move back. But first we have a check. So check, knight moves forward, threatening another check. And instead of, moving this rook back now, there wasn't time because Botvinnik is in the middle of an attack here. Black decides to snatch up material. So, going after this rook is going to leave black in trouble here. So let's see how this continues. So knight moves forward, checking the king. The king has to move here because the queen was covering this other square on g8. So now the knight is under attack. Bishop protects and lines up on the king. So now we have a developing move, just getting this bishop off the back rank, and capture of the pawn here with a discovered attack on the king. And so now the attack continues here against black's king. We have a block, capture of another pawn. Black is still +3 ahead as far as material, and the king moves over to the side. Now, the final move. Bishop captures here on h6, and here Botvinnik's opponent resigned. So you might ask yourself, well, his king is out in the open, but how will the game progress after this? How will the game continue? Well, we'll take a look at that and see how this game could have played out. So let's go back and we'll do a game review, see what the computer says about this game to begin with. Now, just remember, Botvinnik has the white pieces because, I don't know, something changed here with the game review system. Now it just deletes the names of the players for some reason. All right, so if we look at this, Botvinnik played at a 98.5% accuracy rating versus 86 by his opponent. So the game was pretty much even until this midway point, and then all of a sudden it just jumps up in white's favor, and Botvinnik just holds that lead to the end. Now, brilliant moves three brilliant moves by Botvinnik. So we'll take a look at those and see what those were. And then three great moves as well. His opponent did not have any. Now, interestingly enough, this game, went on for quite a few moves, but there were only, well, I shouldn't say quite a few. Let's see. Well, we'll find out here in a minute when I bring up the moves and the analysis. But it looks like there were only 5 best moves played by Botvinnik and only 3 by his opponent. And, still, Botvinnik managed to play 98.5% accuracy. He had no inaccuracies, no mistakes, no misses or blunders. His opponent just had one blunder. So one blunder move in the game just ruined it for black here. So Botvinnik played at a 2900 level versus 2450 by his opponent. So 99.7 opening accuracy rating for both players. Botvinnik played 97.7% accuracy in the middle game versus 72.9 by his opponent. All right, a quick review, and then we'll dig into the analysis and see what was actually going on. So C4, the English opening, and they just play these moves out. Computer or the game review kind of blasts through these quickly. So this was the last book move in the opening, which took us up to move 9. So the first 9 moves were all book moves. It looks like the game went 26 moves before Botvinnik's opponent resigned. All right, so continuing on, as it blasts through these moves, this was the blunder. So if we go back here, the blunder was retreating this knight and allowing everything to start here with the capture of this pawn. So, if we look at this blunder, what would have been best here? Just to move h6 here, keeping the knight and the bishop out of this g5 square. So, just a small defensive move would have been best. The king also has room to maybe escape to h7 if there's ever any back rank threats. All right, continuing on, we have this great move, exchanging rook for bishop, and we continue on here. A brilliant move, attacking, capturing this pawn, tempting black to capture this rook, and we'll see why in the analysis that he should not go after that rook, and of course he didn't. So now we have this brilliant move, just letting this rook be captured in exchange for an attack on the king. So queen captures, and a great move attacking the king. Another great move lining up on the king, and then the attack commences here and until it ends at this move. Now, I'll pull up the analysis now, and we'll see how the game could have continued after I go over the game itself. In the end, we'll continue and see. It looks like black should probably just capture this bishop, and we'll take a look at that. So stay tuned for that. All right, back to the beginning. Pull up the analysis and we'll dig a little deeper into this. So what happened here? We had c4, the English opening, and this e5 move, which the computer is calling that the King's English variation here. So continuing on, knight to c6, or c3, sorry. This is kind of like a reversed Sicilian, where white would play e4 and black would play c5, and then maybe the knight would jump into c6. But it's almost like a Sicilian defense with an extra move. So knight to f6 here, just developing moves. This is called the two knights variation, the English opening two knights variation. So continuing on, now it looks like it's transposed into the English opening Karl's Bremen system. So, and they have these names that they throw up for the different variations, and sometimes the names will be different, depending in what area of the world you're reading about a certain opening, and the same opening variation might have two different names depending what part of the world you're in. But here they're giving this the English opening Karl's Bremen system variation. So continuing on, d5. And now this is the reversed dragon variation. So that's what I mentioned. It's almost like a dragon Sicilian, but reversed, where white is playing the dragon, the Sicilian dragon variation instead of black. So capture, recapture, the bishop develops, and likewise black develops. So both sides are just developing. The bishop is protecting along with the queen this knight that was coming under attack by the bishop and white's knight. So knight to f3, attacking the unprotected pawn. The pawn is defended by the knight, and now we have castling by white. So the game continues with the knight retreating back, and now we have d3, just pushing forward, allowing this bishop to be developed, maybe stopping a possibility of this e-pawn moving forward without being captured. So the game continues with bishop to e7. Black is ready to castle. And now we have a3. And so if we go back here a little bit, here it's called the reverse dragon variation. But as soon as this move is made, now it is changed, transposed to the king side fianchetto line. So this was the last book move, a3 here. And then black plays a5, wanting to possibly prevent this b4, this b4 pawn push in the future. Although the computer says black should have just castled, because if this move is played, the knight could just capture. And then if you have a recapture, the rook would be picked off here. So the game continues with bishop to e3, which normally you don't want to block in one of your central pawns like this. And the computer is also saying knight to a4 should have been played first. But it looks like Botvinnik's plan is to pile up on this knight with bishop and knight to a4. And so, that's what happens. We have castling and then knight to a4. And at this point, white just has a slight edge. And it looks like the best thing, according to the computer, is just to ignore this over here and play f5. But, in the game, if that was ignored, well, it would break the pawns up. So we have a capture, queen recaptures. So this does help Botvinnik develop another piece. And now his rooks are ready to start trying to take control of this half-open c-file. So the game continues with a centralization of this bishop here to d5, although the computer actually prefers bishop to f6 here. Maybe the threat would be that you push forward here, try to attack and pick off this pawn. So the game continues instead with the rooks taking the half-open file. Black does likewise, and they get ready to double the rooks. And now that they're doubled, This can pose potential future threats up this half-open c-file. And seeing that potential, black decides to move the knight, thinking it would be okay, that the rooks could not capture, or the rook could not capture this pawn, but he was wrong. So here, it looks like h6 would have been the best move. But we have this blunder. So we could take a look at the h6 move. After h6, it looks like what? Queen to b5 is recommended, which it targets this pawn right here. So after that, the recommendation is what? Maybe e4, forcing an exchange of these pawns here. And now the computer's saying that knight to d2 would have been better. But if we had e4, what now? Looks like capturing is best. And then bishop captures, attacking the rook. So this is one way the game could have played out. And now, it looks like rook to d2 would be the best move, just targeting the queen. And now, what? Bishop to d6 is recommended, blocking with the bishop. That would allow this possible capture here maybe. Let's take a look at this. So bishop to d6, and looks like computer does not recommend going after this pawn here. Now it's saying this is an inaccuracy, that the queen should have protected this pawn. So if we have bishop to c5 next, which now the computer is recommending that, queen to e7, anyway, I'm not going to dig deeper into that line. You get the point. That's just a different way the game could have played out. But after the doubling of the rooks here, we have the blunder. So the one move in the game that started all this craziness. So here, the best move is to go ahead and capture. And now it looks like knight to c6 would have been better. Something like that. But now what? Bishop to b6. Moving up here. Protecting the rook. And what do they recommend next? Looks like queen to d6. So if queen to d6 is played, now the rook could I was thinking the rook could pick this off. What else is possible? Recommendation is knight to d2. So just lining up on this bishop. Yeah, if you try and pick off this pawn, well then the knight can kind of move and have a discovered attack on that rook. So that might not be something that you want to go into. Computer recommends jumping the knight forward or just retreating back. It looks like that may be the top recommended move as the computer calculates. We'll see in a minute. But anyway, dropping back. Now you're putting pressure, threatening to exchange here. The computer recommends that black goes ahead and captures. And then what? Now, rook to e7. Just getting rid of this rook and exchanging off some more. Although white is ahead by +1 at this point. All right, back to the game. We'll see how this blunder played out. So capture, instead the bishop was moved here, which attacks the queen. So we have a capture, knight captures. Oh, excuse me. Computer recommends the knight capturing, saying that would have been better. But it looks like either way, white is winning at this point. So pretty crazy that white is already winning. If the knight captures, the rook will still follow through with this capture of the f-pawn. So, capture, a brilliant move. Now, we'll see why this should not be captured. If we have a capture here, well then it allows queen to c4, check, which targets the king. Let me see. The computer is thinking here. So, of course it's saying, let's see, h6 would have been a better move. But if the king captures there and we go ahead, check the king, what can the king do here? There's a possibility of this knight jumping forward with check as well. So computer says the best move is that, to move the king out into the opening, or the open, which is not looking too good there. And now, what? Queen to g4? Queen to e4. You could go here, and if the king moves, you could grab a pawn maybe. But that's not recommended. It looks like we'll just take a look at this attack here. So now the king can move back up to f7. So king to f7, but then that allows queen to c4 again, king back to g6. Now what? If you don't want the king to just move back and forth, now they're saying queen to e4, king back up to f7, and I don't know. I think there's more that can be done here. Now they're recommending knight to g5. So, and with this move, the best you have is to sacrifice your queen. Then white would just be winning, after the bishop recaptures. So the best move here is queen captures. Here the king is going to be, if the king retreats back here, there's a checkmate. What can the king do? King to f6. There's queen to f3, so a mate in 4. So the best thing is to just capture. But you see, if we go back here, the whole idea of this is to lure the king out into the open. So this move should have been played, that move was played, but if this move happened, it kind of just pulls the king out into the open, and with queen to c4, the king has to start running. So this move is best because it prevents the king from going back in here and hiding. Now what? It's saying the king has to go forward. All right, back to the game. We had this capture. h6 is played, giving a little escape hole for the king possibly. And now the rook moves back, retreating away where it can retreat down to the, maybe to b3 or something. But that is not played. The queen attacks, check, and now we have, and here, it looks like the best thing would have been to block with the queen here. So the knight jumps forward, a brilliant move, sacrificing the rook. Now we have the knight jumping forward with check. The king is forced to come forward, and now the bishop just lines up here. So developing move by black. It looks like they actually prefer this move here, attacking the bishop. So, what if that would have been played? If you have something like this, well now, what? Knight to e7 check is preferred. All right. Well, I'm not going to go into it. I don't want to drag the video out too long. Let's get down to the end and see how the game could have played out further after that crazy ending. So we have bishop to d6 developing. The knight captures the pawn with a discovered attack. Block. Bishop captures. And so at this point, black was +5 ahead after capturing that rook, but now he's only +3. The king moves out of check, and then a sacrifice of this bishop. So this is where the game ended, because Botvinnik's opponent could see enough moves ahead to know that it was bad news for him after this sacrifice. So the best thing to do is to go ahead and accept the bishop sacrifice. But now you have this follow-up of queen to h4, and after this, the king is forced to go here. The follow-up is queen to h7 check, and now black has two options, king to f8 or king to f6. So either move would allow the queen to capture black's queen, and then just be ahead in material. If this knight were captured, well then you can pick off the rook over here. So we could take a look at how this could have played out. The computer recommends king to f8 as being best. And then here, looks like capturing the queen would be the best way forward. So queen captures. And now you're targeting this rook here. So, what should be done? The rook is targeted. At this point, white is +4 ahead. Also, there is a threat of a checkmate here. So we have this move as well. Queen to f7 checkmate. So it looks like the best thing to do would be rook to e7. Queen captures. Now the queen is kind of trapped in here. Bishop takes e5. Queen takes a5. And white is now +7 ahead. So there you see how the game could have played out. Is there anything else that looks interesting here? After capture, check, king moves, check. We looked at king to f8. If this were played, well then now you have knight to g4 check. You're in check. You could still maybe go after this queen. The king has to move. And if the king moves to g5, there's a mate in 1. So with this move, there'd be a mate in 1 right here. So going back, don't want to move to g5 for sure. So your only other option is e6. But now you have what? Bishop to f5, check. King to d5. So just chasing this king across the board. Now you can take time out from chasing and just go after the queen. So +4 ahead at this point. King to c5 looks like the most, the highest recommended move here. So king over to c5, but now you pick this rook off, and white would just be even more ahead and really winning. So, if the rook, if you try to save this rook, how could you do that? Let's see. Can't move here. The only way to save the rook, I guess, is to move here. But what does this allow? Queen to b3 check. King is forced to go, if you go to d4, well, then you're in trouble. There's a mate in 1 with queen to c4. So you have to go here, but there's still a mate in 3. Starting with d4 check, forcing the king to capture. And now, what do you do next here? Well, you have queen to c3. And there's an interesting little pattern here when you're attacking with the queen on a corner. So the king can move to any of these squares around it. When you're attacking in one of the corner squares with the queen covers all the squares on 2 sides and the squares through the diagonal here. The only squares not covered are these 2 right here. So d5 and e4. So the bishop is covering that e4 square. The only option is that move. But now we have this knight to f6 mate move here. So knight to f6 mate, covering both of these, but checkmating. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that crazy game by Botvinnik. So once again, this game, where's the review at? Game review. There, that's what I wanted to look at. So 98.5% accuracy by Botvinnik. Getting close to a perfect game. He didn't pick all the best moves, so that's what was very interesting, that there were only 5 of the best moves played out of like a 27 move game, and then 3, his opponent only picked 3 of the best moves. But also interesting were no inaccuracies, mistakes, or misses. Just that one blunder that led to destruction in this game. And so 2,900 rated play by Botvinnik versus 2,450 by his opponent, Portisch. And just outstanding, 97.7 in the middle game versus 72.9 by his opponent. All right, well, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave comments, anything you would like. Thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.